Welcome to the LaunchFamily Podcast, where we make sense of modern parenting one real conversation at a time. I'm your host, Jessica Shelley, a mom of six, former teacher, and your trusted friend helping you cut through the noise of today's parenting overload. If you've ever felt alone in your parenting journey, wondering if you're the only one whose child throws tantrums, struggles with friendships, or just won't do their homework, then this episode is for you. Today's guest is Julie Freedman-Smith, a longtime parenting coach, educator, and co-founder of Parenting Power. With over 20 years of experience helping families move from chaos to connection, Julie is a champion of meeting families where they are and helping them take that next step without shame, perfection, and always with a heart. So Julie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have a chat with you.
Yes. Well, okay, let's give our listeners a little bit of context for who you are. And, you've supported families for more than 2 decades. Can you tell us how you got into that work?
Yes, I was actually a music teacher and teaching all the kids in the school where I taught. And I kept answering similar questions from various parents and realized that a lot of people were going through the same challenges. And then the head of school at that time was a good friend of mine, and Gail Bell is her name. And we thought, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could help parents have a better understanding of their kids and how to interact with them? And so we founded our company, Parenting Power. And we had that company for 18 and a half years. And then during COVID, it shut down, but I've kept going with Parent Mentor now, and we're still friends. So yeah, it was really a matter of noticing that parents were often struggling. They thought they were alone in the struggle, but so many people were going through the same thing. So that's really what made me wonder, oh, how could we be more helpful?
Yeah, maybe starting to notice a pattern in the conversations that are coming up, as you mentioned, the questions too, like, oh, maybe we're more connected than we actually might think.
Yes.
What are some of those common threads that you've seen come out in your work? And, anything from like toddler tantrums to, young adults that are struggling to launch. Like, what are some of those common threads or topics that you typically talk about?
Well, I think it's often parents feeling like it's all their fault,
Mhm.
like taking all the blame for something, which really is typically a good chunk of it is developmental, and then how we respond to it. And so I think that's the biggest thread, whether we've got littles and and they're just in that place where they're demanding control, or we've got older kids who are demanding control. As parents, we want to get it right. We've never done this before, but it's the most important job we feel we can do. And so there's kind of an imbalance of what is possible because we're not very parents are often not very self-compassionate. And so just noticing, hey, I've never done this before. I need to figure out how to do this in the best way that I can, or even a pretty good way is also good.
Yeah, I resonate with that so much. I mean, I've got six kiddos. My oldest is 9, my youngest is 6 months. And like by the time I had number 4, 5, 6, I was like, oh, I got to figure it out. But then also like I don't because they're all unique little individuals.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I think makes parenting hard today too is just like this sheer amount of information and advice, but then also feeling like, oh well, if I put this into practice and it doesn't work, then it's because of me. I'm a bad mom, right?
Right.
So like this shame cycle. So one of the things that you had brought up originally when we connected was this idea that we've like lost the back fence. So can you walk us through that illustration,
Yeah.
and chat more about what that means for parenting today?
So this is just my perspective, but having been a parenting coach for 23 years now, a lot has changed during that time, including the smartphone kind of coming into our lives and being such a huge part of it. And prior to that time, which many of you and your listeners will not remember, but I do remember, we were raising kids over kind of a little more of like freestyle parenting, or everybody was out in the backyard, or people were talking to each other over their back fences and just, oh, you'll never believe what happened today. Oh, I know it's happening here too. Can you believe it? And everybody's kind of keeping an eye on everybody's kids. Certainly the way I grew up, and so we all kind of knew what was going on. And then when the smartphones came along with a couple of other scenarios, maybe a little bit of extra fear about what was going on, more people stayed inside. Fewer people were talking to their neighbors. And we were also seeing these beautifully curated lives possibly not true, um, on social media. And so there wasn't as much of an understanding that, oh, yeah, this is just kind of what happens with our kids at this age. But really, then many parents felt like, oh, I'm the only one. This is happening because I'm doing something wrong. And so that's what I mean when I say we've lost the back fence. We don't see things quite as broadly. We don't have as much of a sense of community, and that I think often makes parents be harder on themselves.
I think that's a really powerful point. We've talked about it on a couple other podcasts too, but this idea of how social media kind of creates this narrative in our head and like maybe like this unseen standard that we're subconsciously trying to hold ourselves to, knowing that whatever we're seeing on social media is someone else's like highlight reel, right? Like we all have great days when everything does look great, but there's also the majority of the days when things are just normal and existing. So um let's talk a little bit more about like this social media element. I think as we're starting to see like, the millennial parent, the Gen Z parents that are coming, how is like social media um maybe a help or a hindrance to, effective parenting?
Right. Just to be clear, I
Yeah.
don't want to kind of airbrush the
Mhm.
previous generations and say everything was perfect then and we've screwed it up now, because it sure wasn't. I mean, we're seeing the kind of what's happened because of the way things were. And my belief is that every generation is doing their best to learn from the mistakes that happen and just try to be a little bit better.
Mhm.
And so there are so many benefits of the technology that we use. This is one of them, right? We have a chance to connect. You and I would never have met otherwise. And there are so many great pieces of information that we can access. There's a ton of value in social media, and also our ability to create just using technology is vast and fascinating. And communities. I know that my kids grew up, and I'm sure it's even more so nowadays. But my kids have friends all over the world that they actually, some of them they have met. But again, they would never have met those people if social media wasn't a factor. So I'm not against screens, and um, I do think that there can be this element of keeping up with the Joneses. It was there before, and now it's just highlighted. And also the the quick fix, the kind of numbing effect of social media and scrolling, right? We get those dopamine hits. So I think also people aren't as used to feeling their feelings and letting them out, because often when people have a bad feeling, they just numb it and make it go away. So that's another part of it, is just we never really get to the crux of the matter, or it takes longer to get to the crux of the emotional matter. And therefore we might not be able to have that experience and learn from it in the same way.
I think it's kind of like that two-edged like sword, right? Of like the connectivity and the connection. There's more information out there, like that's more accessible for parents, right? Like we don't have to go get a book from the library or purchase a book in order to learn about some sort of child development thing. But at the same time, like that comparison is much more in your face and accessible versus like having to drive to go through a neighborhood or something to like see a different lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Also,
yeah.
we used to not know what people were doing when we didn't see them. And now we know what they're doing, and we know that they're doing it without us. And so I think the initial response is, why didn't I get asked? What's wrong with me? So it's very good at helping us to beat up on ourselves. And many of us do that well without technology. So it just ups it a little bit. It can take us out a little bit, I think.
Yeah. What do you say to parents that are maybe navigating through some of that or like feeling like they're constantly failing or like being stuck in that kind of comparison loop?
I really One of the things I hope to instill in everybody I meet, whether it's my clients or people, is that it's not a race. We're all on our own journey, and I know this sounds very hokey, but we can only be who we are, and be in our journey. We are the main character of our story, but we can't be in somebody else's story. And often, when we keep all those ideas in our heads, they go round and round and round and feel like they're louder. And so being able to connect with someone, get those ideas through our mouths and out and have a conversation about it, often minimizes their power and helps us to feel like, oh, okay, I can get that. In fact, often when my clients start telling me their challenges and actually itemizing their challenges, they start hearing them and then they think, oh, wait, these two things are kind of similar. So they start to see how things are related. And from there, I can share some language that could be helpful or some information about kids' development. And then where they thought there was no hope, they now are feeling hopeful. And then they have the courage to move forward.
I think something that is jumping out of me is like kind of normalizing the actual like struggles of parenting, right?
Yes. Yes.
Talking about them. Like this is like the whole point of the podcast too, is just like talking about what's really going on, right? Like
Hmm.
we all truly like want what's best for our kids, and we all have different backgrounds and experiences and the way that we were raised, and things come out in different, like if you have a partner that you're also parenting with, like there's complexities in that. And so what are some of those other ways that we can maybe help parents normalize this struggle, or be in some of those communities where this is normalized?
I encourage parents to find somebody in their world who's safe in a way that they can share the joys and the frustrations, and they're not going to feel judged by that person. Because again, once it doesn't have to be me, but once you get the noise out of your head a little bit and talk about it and look at it a little more clearly, then it's manageable, or it's at least there's a potential to manage it. So I love to encourage families to find someone they can talk to. And sometimes it's not your partner. Like sometimes it is. And if that's the way it's set up, fantastic. But some people, and often single parents, are in this boat that they're doing everything. And there's no one to bounce ideas off of. There's no one to just listen and be that comfort and support. So I think that's one of the most important things, is to find that safe person who's going to love you regardless of whether you're having a crappy day or a good day. I think we all need that.
Yeah, and I love that perspective too. Like we had another podcast episode where the expert that we had on was talking a lot about just building community, like inviting people over for dinner. Like your house doesn't have to be pristine, doesn't have to be perfect. And then I had brought up the question of like, oh, well, what if we're like too shy? Or like what if we're afraid of how our house looks? Or what if our kid like jump off the couch and that's not something that they allow in their house? Like all of the feelings of maybe like potential judgment or shame or things that can go into that would inhibit that kind of connection. Any strategies for like just meeting people where they are, or even being proactive in who you're reaching out to? Like, what are some of those things that we could do? Like, wait, instead of waiting for someone to come to us, maybe should what? Well, how can I find these people?
Yeah. So if having them in your home is too daunting, great. Let's start with an even tinier step. Let's go to the park. Let's meet at the playground. Stay a little later at the school playground when we're picking kids up, so that we're on neutral territory and people can just be and just start to notice. And if you find yourself at the same playground, or I know that for me, and this has got to be the same for so many parents, that as a parent, I ended up talking to the same parents when I was waiting to pick my kids up from school, um, over and over again, or if you're waiting at the bus stop for your kids to come home that way. And so this is a way you're seeing these people day after day. If you want to wait a week or 2 weeks, great. But notice the people who kind of look and kind of smile, or just I love to have a plan of what I'm going to say. So a lot of the work that I do with families is helping them have the words that they're going to say in the heat of the moment so that they don't end up saying something they'll regret. Oh, if you know that there's someone that you want to be friends with, or that could be that person, plan what you're going to say ahead of time. And it could be things like, oh, it's so hot today. I'm not even sure how I can stand it. Or I brought an extra drink. Are you thirsty? Would you like a drink while we're waiting for the kids? Like, plan your opening line, and that's going to give you a little bit of courage. And also ask questions and get people talking about themselves, because the more, uh, then you can just appear to be a good listener. So it means that you don't have to do all the talking. So those are two things that I would suggest. And then once go to the park with someone, then maybe you go to a play, something like it doesn't all of a sudden have to be, hey, come to my house, we're going to be best friends. It's just baby steps into figuring it out. And you might very quickly discover that, no, this person's not who I want to be around, great. But you've also had the courage to try, and then it may not feel quite as daunting the next time.
I mean, I'm a former teacher and I'm like thinking back because I taught kinder first and second grade and I was like, man, feels like they never had like struggles with making friends until things got a little complicated as they were like approaching leaving elementary school, middle school is like social stuff, high school is a whole other thing. But for some reason, like now that I'm having this conversation with you, I'm like, did we forget how to make friends?
I think so. And also this element, especially when we're on the playground, some of us have a little bit of a regression to what it felt like when we were at school and not having those friends.
Mm.
I have there's a guy that I follow in my coaching world, and he talks about this idea of for the sake of. So sometimes when we won't do things for ourselves, if we can find a really good somebody else to do it for, then we find the courage to do it. And as parents, I think that that just rings true so clearly because there are many things that we may not do for ourselves, but for the sake of our children, we will do it. And so it might be a case of, yeah, I don't really want to talk to those people. And I want my kids to be part of a community. I want my kids to see how we form a community, to learn how to be social. So I've got to find the courage to do it for the sake of my kids. So that might be another motivator.
Love that shift because I think that, oh man, I resonate with that. And so I'm excited to hear how that goes too for our listeners that are listening in. One of the other kind of complex relationships is kind of like this intergenerational differing philosophies. We're raising our kids very differently than how we were raised because we have technology in our pockets. And
Hmm.
how can we have more productive like conversations with the different generations, or how can we kind of navigate some of these complexities with in-laws or parents or aunts and uncles that want to kind of provide advice?
I love that question. It's in one of the things that I'm finding interesting is that when I first started, and I had little kids, I was definitely answering that question from the parent side of it. And now many more of my friends are grandparents. So I'm now starting to see it from both ends. And I think it's as confusing and uncomfortable for both sides. So I think that might be something to just take on. It's not only the parents who are feeling uncomfortable about it. The grandparents don't know what to say or how to say it. Some people are very bossy, some people sit back, but as kids, we can see that our parents are frustrated with us. Or so one of the things that I know for sure is that everybody cares. Everybody cares about the kids that are being raised. And so when there is conflict, and conflict is always happening, like with human beings, there is always conflict. So we can't be wishing for that moment when there will be no conflict because we'll be dead. So conflict happens. And so part of it is setting ourselves up like, oh, am I already primed for a fight? Or am I going into this like, yes, there is conflict, there is a difference here, but how can we both bring our best selves to solve this problem? So one of the ways is to notice that everybody's doing it for the good of the child. And so what are we agreeing on? We agree that we love our kids. We agree that we want to, this is my assumption. We agree that we want to raise kids who are, feel capable in the world, who feel loved, who feel cared for. And I think naming the conflict can also be helpful too. So like I feel like our perspective is this, but your perspective is that, and we obviously are not going to agree on everything. So where can we agree? And how can we agree to disagree? Because that's the other thing. Can we disagree and still be okay as a family? And I hope the answer is yes. There's so much divisiveness in our world right now that it's really easy to be us against them. But if we can find a way to work together, oftentimes when I think about, I'm just realizing that it's kind of a power struggle all over again, right? It's that parent-child power struggle, but now it's parent-grandparent power struggle. When I talk about power struggles, I always say, if you're in a situation where it's you against your kid in a situation, if it can be you and your kid in the situation, but it's you guys on the same side, then it's easier to make that happen. And so my language around that is, wow, we've got a problem. You want this. I want this. How do we work together to make it work? And I think if we can take that same approach with parent grandparent, we've got a problem because we disagree about some of these things. We love each other very much, how can we make it work, and really inviting cooperation instead of just being very firm in your own ways. Another sentence starter that I really like is in our family, we. So when your aunt says, well, we always used to finish all the food on our plate, you can say, oh, that's in our family, we are teaching our kids to trust their tummies and to know when they're hungry or full. And that's just something we're doing differently. Done. So you don't have to say my way is right. You don't have to get the other person to agree with you. You can just say, in our family, we do it this way. Other families do it another way.
Love that. I've actually used that one. I think especially when it comes to like school lunches and things, or when we go out to other places and they're like, oh, well, that kid's allowed to do that. And I was like, well, every family has different rules. And this is one of the rules that we live by in our household, you know? And that's really all that we need to do. We don't need to justify it any further than that. And it makes it a simple like leveler, I think. And I haven't actually thought about using it with family. But that does feel like it would release some of that pressure too of just using the same language.
I hope
And
so. And I think if you know why you're doing something, like if you as a parent are like, this is a value I have, this is what we're doing, this is something that we believe in as a family, then if you truly believe in it, then you don't necessarily need the buy-in from all the other people. So you can just kind of put your feet firmly on the ground and say, in our family, this is what we're doing. I see that you love us very much and you're wanting to share your ways. I appreciate that. This is what we're doing right now, and we'll see how it goes.
yeah.
It's all a work in progress, quite frankly. But the other thing is, because I was talking to a grandma yesterday who feels like when her grandkids are in her house, she wants to have some boundaries around certain behavior in certain rooms. It's not really enforced in their home, and she was feeling uncomfortable about having boundaries for her home. And I kind of feel like in your home, not that you need to go against it, like you're not going to pour sugar down your kids' throats if you're, or your grandkids' throats or whatever. But in your home, if you have certain rules about, not jumping on the couch or whatever, I think if you're looking after your grandkids and they're in your home, or if you're looking after somebody who's playing at your house, you know what? Again, it's that language. In this house, we keep our feet on the floor. We keep our feet off the couch. So I think it's okay for the older generation to have a say. It's just a question of also the parents really want a chance to do the parenting. The older generation already did their try. It's the parents' turn now. So it's sticky, but I do believe that if everybody loves the kids, then we just start from that point and see if we can soften the conflict a little.
Yeah, we don't have to like come at each other, or we don't have to be defensive all the time. It's just like, okay, this is just the way that it is. And wow, that is incredibly freeing. So I do want to talk a little bit too, because you had mentioned conflict and we had talked about, the complex like family dynamics and things, but also this idea of conflict or reconnection with the child. So what are some ways that parents can reconnect with their kids when things might be feeling tense or, distant, or there may be, a little bit more space there than what the parents looking for?
Right. So one thing is to notice what connection looks like for you might be different than what connection looks like for your kids. So what I mean by that, and I know this to be true in my marriage. I also know it to be true for one of my kids. Um, for me, I am somebody who talks to think. So in order for me to process things, I need to talk. But I'm married to somebody who thinks to talk. So before he talks, he thinks about things to make sure he's going to say it properly. But so when I start talking to him about all sorts of stuff and he's quiet, I'm like, what? He's not connecting with me. Why isn't he? And our kids may be the same way. So if we are somebody who's quite verbal and our kids may be thinking before they talk, we may perceive their lack of talking as a lack of connection, when in reality, they're working on what they're going to say and then they come to it. So part of it is just noticing the differences in people and not assigning malicious intent to that. So like believing that they're trying their best. I think we all go through these places like kind of 15, 16-year-old to 18-year-old boys are often not very nice to their moms, and that's just a phase of kind of separating themselves. That happens a lot, and there may be kids who just don't talk very much, or they're tired. Sometimes our kids get to us after school, and how was your day? What happened? Did you meet anybody? What did you learn in math? And they've been working so hard at school all day, and they're just exhausted, and so they don't have capacity to turn it on again for us. So part of it is that. Part of it is doing what they want to do, even if it's not something we want to do. So if you have a child who loves playing a certain game on their screens and it's just does not make any sense to you, sit and be the learner. Can you teach me this? How might I play this? What are the two things that you love most about this thing? And have them be the person who's the expert and sharing it with you, and do your very best to stay tuned in. So that's another thing. And the other thing is to just realize that sometimes our own self-talk gets in our way. So when our kids, I learned this from Renee Jane at gozen.com. She's a phenomenal resource for parents. And sometimes, if our kid is really being difficult, we just feel like we don't have that connection. Our internal voice might be saying, God, my kid is giving me such a hard time. Why is this kid always giving me such a hard time? And if we notice that we're having that internal thought a lot, sometimes if we can come up with a different internal thought, we can shift the way we're feeling. So instead of saying, my kid is giving me a hard time, or when you notice yourself saying that, if you switch it just slightly to, boy, my kid is having a hard time. Oh, now instead of feeling like I have to fight this hard time, I can be, oh, my kid is having a hard time. How can I make this easier? Maybe they need me to be quiet a little bit. Maybe we can put on some music and just be present together in the same space without having to talk. Or maybe we could head out for a walk and just look at nature. So sometimes it's just shifting our own thoughts that can help us to have a better connection with our kids.
I love that reframing too of like, oh, my child is having a rough time right now. Like that in and of itself, it seems like a much better way to approach the connection than trying to like fix it, or like that it's maliciously intended to like destroy your day, right? Like your child is a child.
That's right.
So you have a little grace with them. Before we wrap up, we do have a couple questions that were actually written in to our family coach, Emmy, at Launch Family. And I would love to get your take on a couple of these.
Sure.
The first question says, my child is melting down daily and I'm out of ideas. So anything that you would recommend that could be like a calming reset or reframing tool for this family?
Sure. I'm going to guess that child is in the toddler preschool age range, but having raised kids who are now well into their 20s, it might be happening in other ways. So I think at other ages. So I think it really is an age appropriate. Like you have to approach this in an age appropriate way. Start noticing what's happening around this time, because oftentimes these meltdowns happen at the same time. So they could be happening when, as the parent, you might be on your device, you might be trying to get dinner going, you're doing a bunch of things, maybe you're changing the diaper of another kid, and it could be that your child is having that big emotional outbreak to get your attention away from those things. So start to notice that, because if that's the case, can we attend to that child ahead of time before they get to that stage? So if if you've got to be getting dinner ready, and that you've got other kids that need your attention, how do we, before that child ever gets to the point of melting down, how do we attend to them? How can we have them with us? So it could be, if you're making dinner, can we have that child up on a chair with a sink full of water, washing plastic containers and just helping us? Because if they're right beside us and they're at our height, then they might not need to get to a meltdown stage, because they're already in the picture. They're not down on the floor looking at our bum all the time. Like, they're right there. They feel like they're a part of the action. So that could be part of it. How do we make that child a helper? How do we give them attention? And then I don't know if you follow Mr. Chaz on Instagram. I follow him, and he has this great song. When I want to feel happy, I just breathe. When I want to feel happy, I just breathe. I can't remember the rest of it right now, but you can check it out on his Instagram. But sometimes singing a song and getting our kids to breathe can be a really great way to just give a reset. And also not making their feelings go away. Dr. Jennifer Kalari talks a lot about mirroring affect. So sometimes when our kids are sad and grumpy or having big emotions and we go, "You're okay, everything's okay," and we're all happy and trying to tell them that their feelings are not actually happening, that typically works for kids until about 18 months, maybe 20 months, and then it kind of backfires. So instead of doing this opposite face, mirror their face. "Oh, wow, you are really upset. I'm so sorry to hear that. You're really angry about this." And when we see a face that looks like our face, mirror neurons release oxytocin. So that is a way of also getting the bodies to calm down in both of our bodies, parent body and kid body. So that's another way that we can help. Wow, I talked a lot about that, but I hope those are some ideas that are helpful.
So many great strategies. And I think, the more tools that we can have in our parenting tool belt, the better to be able to pull out when we need it. So, the last question that we have from the parent community is, I want to parent differently than I was raised, but how do I actually do that? So, any advice for breaking generational cycles, while also not like alienating the family that maybe you're wanting to do something different from?
Yes, I think getting clear, it's very easy to know that we want to do something different, but it's harder to know, so what is that thing going to be? Right? And that's, I help families with that all the time, because often if we have two parents, they are coming from different places. So we have to find, okay, not what's my way or his way or whatever, what's my way or the other parent's way, but really what's our family's way to support this child? Because oftentimes if we have more than one kid, and I'm preaching to the choir here, they're not all the same. And what works for one child does not work for the other. So how are we going to meet this child's needs, as opposed to, we're going to do it my way or we're going to do it my way? So I think that's part of it. Know what your values are. Like, what are the things that are important to you to teach? Because kids live what they learn. So they're going to learn their values from watching us, what we do, not just what we say. Have a vision for how you want that child to feel or behave as an adult. Like, what kind of characteristics do you have for them when they're grown up? Because if that's who you want them to be as an adult, every day we need to be putting that stuff into them. And so that's going to help us to get clearer about the kinds of things we want to teach with our parenting and the way we want to parent. So it's less about, like, it's good to know what I don't want to do, but it's really about clarifying what I want to do. And then you don't have to say, "I don't like the way you raised me, so we're doing it this way." You can say, "Because I want my child to learn this, this is the way that I am raising that child."
Framing is so helpful, I think, too, because if we are defensive or we have like things that are maybe unresolved and we're like, we know we just don't want to do that, that neutralizes the language to them, where it's like they're not going to get defensive, like whoever you're talking to, right? But you can still own that truth for you and your family and your child and feel comfortable and strong in that. So Julie, I just want to thank you so much for the warmth, wisdom, and honesty that you brought to the conversation today. You've reminded us that parenting doesn't require perfection. It just requires the presence, curiosity, and connection. The insights help us all like lower our shoulders, take a deep breath. We have more tools in our tool belt now. To our listeners, if you found today's episode helpful, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. You'll find all of the links to Julie's books, coaching, videos, and everything in the show notes, because support doesn't end when the episode does. Until next time, remember that you're not alone and parenting doesn't have to be a solo mission. We're here with you, cheering you on every step of the way.